Tale is a 2001 American comedy romance film written, produced, and directed by Brian Helgeland and features an all-star cast, including the late Heath Ledger and a completely nude Paul Bettany. I really enjoyed my recent rewatch, and if you want to revisit the film, it's now on Netflix. While this movie has a medieval setting, the film is intentionally anachronistic and it's not meant to be historically accurate. Director Helgeland said, "A Knight's Tale is a tribute to anyone who has accomplished something very far-fetched." I sort of equate this to modern adaptations of Shakespeare, making it more accessible to modern audiences. It doesn't mean it's perfect. I'll touch on a few things that didn't work for me along the way. But if you love this movie as much as I did, I mean, why else would you be here? Stay tuned as I break down the costumes for you. And I've added timestamps so you can skip ahead to another chapter at any time. Before we move ahead, there are spoilers in this video. The costumes for A Knight's Tale were designed by Caroline Harris. She's a lesser-known costume designer who gives very few interviews. After working on A Knight's Tale in 2001, Harris went on to do 3 other pictures with Brian Helgeland, including The Order, also starring Heath Ledger, 42, starring Chadwick Boseman, and Legend, about identical twin gangsters Ronald and Reginald Cray. She also worked with Game of Thrones director Miguel Sapochnik on Repo Man. I thought it was an awesome movie despite the negative reviews. And just to show you what a small world it is, Game of Thrones costume armor supervisor Simon Brindle was credited with special costumes on A Knight's Tale, while The Witcher costume designer Tim Aslam was assistant wardrobe supervisor. Brindle and Miguel Sapochnik will reunite in the upcoming House of the Dragon. Writer and director Brian Helgeland said in an interview that his team wanted to create a period piece that stayed fair to the period, but felt contemporary, and the audience to feel like they had been invited in and not overwhelmed by period costumes, obscure speech, and antique music. With this in mind, Helgeland brought in the 1970s decade to riff off the 1370s setting, stating in an interview that, "I wanted to make the Middle Ages feel as alive as they were to the people who inhabited them." According to an interview, he encouraged his various department heads to follow his lead and to take liberties and flights of fancy that are sometimes 6 centuries wide. Production designer Tony Burrow and costume designer Caroline Harris conceived a color palette that subtly becomes richer as William's fortunes grow. In developing a look for the male band of medieval misfits, Harris said, "Brian and I were inspired a great deal by the look of the Rolling Stones on their 1972 tour." Burrow added that, "There is historical reality, then there's the script, the director, and contemporary perceptions, often all working against each other. You must blend it all together." Roland and Wat, played by Mark Addy and Alan Tudyk, were the former squires to the late Sir Ector. They are part of the scheme, although reluctantly at first, to help their friend William Thatcher assume the title of Sir Ulrich von Liechtenstein, which enables them to participate in the tournaments. At the beginning of the story, William Wat and Roland are dressed in buttery yellow linen shirts and trousers and leather vests and tunics. In their initial ruse, William needs one more pass to win the tournament and collect their winnings, so their vests are faintly stenciled, perhaps sun-bleached, with Sir Ector's sigil of a white stag. According to A Complete Guide to Heraldry, the stag running, depicted at full stride with all 4 legs in the air, is called stag courant. Many of you will likely know that the stag is also the sigil of House Baratheon, and Mark Addy played King Robert Baratheon in the HBO series Game of Thrones. In this heraldry, the stag is leaping or salient. After the trio collects their winnings and Will receives them to use the money to pay for the entry fee at the next tournament, where he impersonates a fictional knight, they realize that they cannot proceed with Sir Ector's sigil, or else they might be found out. In a scene cut from the movie, Will suggests that they use the phoenix as their emblem, since the phoenix represents new life by arising from the ashes of its predecessor. In A Complete Guide to Heraldry, The mythological phoenix is frequently found as a crest. It is always represented as a demi-eagle issuing from flames of fire. According to the author, without its fiery surroundings, it would cease to be a phoenix. This sigil also looks similar to the Trans Am Firebird decal, made famous by Burt Reynolds in the movie Smokey and the Bandit. This ties into the 1970s theme of the movie. Wat's tunic is stenciled with 3 phoenixes on the front. The large one represents the tourney knight William, while the 2 smaller represent his squires Roland and Wat. In this scene, Wat is wearing a robe that we see Sir Ector wearing in a flashback scene, which reinforces the idea that they repurposed some of his old clothes. Just my thought, but they could have sold some of them for a bit of coin at the beginning. As the team begins to win more tourneys, they get newer clothes in richer colors. Roland is handy with a needle, so it is possible that they bought some fabric while touring and were able to create these new looks. The sigil is also more pronounced, and they have leather laces on their tunics. In the final act, when Will has been knighted as Sir William, the green in their tunics is even richer, and instead of the sigil being stenciled, it is now a black applique trimmed in gold. Wat accumulates some bling along the way, including this gold necklace and some rings. They paint their faces with the phoenix. And I would not have noticed this myself because it's so subtle, but eagle-eyed blogger Diane's Costumes and Research noticed that Wat had added his lion to the sleeves. In a cut scene, Wat wanted to have the lion as their new sigil. William Thatcher, the hero of the story, is played by Heath Ledger, who is a peasant who takes on the title of Sir Ulrich von Liechtenstein after his knight Sir Ector suddenly dies. It's likely that this velvet and leather patchwork vest that William wears in the first act is from Sir Ector's trunk of clothes. Initially, William wears the Dead Knight's steel tournament armor, including all of the underbits. It's likely the aging Sir Ector has been attending tourneys in this dated armor for some time, as Count Adhemar makes fun of the style. Out of fear that they might recognize Sir Ector's sigil, the team changes it to the 3 phoenix emblem, which you can see here on William's shield. According to Best of Sicily magazine, while coats of arms were certainly seen during the later Crusades, it seems that they originated at tournaments where they made it easier for both the heralds and the spectators to identify the participants. At one point, the armor even gets cracked, but Kate repairs it. According to their website, Rod Vass at the UK-based Armadillo Limited created all of the principal and stunt armors in steel and polyurethane, including William's 2 sets of armor. And I should mention that while the styles of these armors are mostly historically accurate from my understanding, they are a good 100 years later than the story itself. You can see in these publicity images that the armor itself is basic steel, and there are no fancy embellishments or scroll work, likely because Sir Ector was very practical, or possibly he didn't have a lot of money. Underneath the armor, William is wearing a quilted gambeson and some additional leather protections. But like we see in many medieval shows, there's no leg armor and there's no protection under the arms. But in the joust, his horse has armor that covers his legs and privates. Now, while I don't analyze animal costumes, I thought I'd mention that Armadillo Limited also created all of the horse armor. The gambeson, like we see here, was a garment typically made from layers of linen. He's also wearing some leather chaps over his linen trousers. I wasn't crazy about the chaps worn over light green pants with this cropped jacket because my eyes just go to his crotch. Here's a close-up of the leather gorget that Will is wearing under his armor. The other fellow in this picture is wearing a bever, which is a piece of armor that with the helmet is meant to protect the jaw and throat. Kate makes Will a set of lighter armor to give him an advantage in the tournaments. Like Kate herself, the armor is no nonsense without any added embellishments like we see in the other knights' competition armor, like Count Adhemar and Edward the Black Prince. And while there is no decoration on his armor, the anachronistic Nike swoosh was a very subtle touch. In Greek mythology, Nike was the goddess of victory. This part of Will's armor is called the Grand Guard. According to the Art Institute Chicago, by the 16th century, armorers devised this steel reinforcement as a replacement for wooden shields. The Grand Guard was bolted down firmly over the left side of the breastplate. Will's helmet is similar to the armet-style helmet pictured here. This style of helmet was essentially restricted to the fully armored man-at-arms. Here are some close-ups of Will's armor, both the steel plate and the polyurethane armor. The complete set of Heath Ledger's polyurethane armor sold at auction for $6,000 US. Will wears this ensemble to the ball where they all dance to Bowie's Golden Years. I have to admit I'm not crazy about all of the chartreuse green in this scene. There is already a lot of green in the movie that this feels like overkill. While the green in Will's costume is softer, story-wise it doesn't really make sense. During an earlier scene, Roland tells Jocelyn's handmaiden Christiana that he will be wearing green with wooden toggles while looking at the tent fabric. Therefore, I fully expected him to show up in this, so at some point there was a disconnect between the script and the costumes. My favorite look for Will is this outfit. It really suited Heath Ledger to wear this off-white linen crop jacket with the detachable sleeves. I didn't think about it until after the fact that Will is the White Knight versus Count Adhemar, who dresses mostly in black and brown. Being a blacksmith, Kate wears practical clothing, a tunic with a brown suede surcoat laced on the sides. When she's working, she wears an apron. As she becomes one of the crew, her colors also align with the team. I like this little detail on her cuffs, just a little bit of leather, and this picture on the right is her costume from an auction, although I don't think she ever wore the green over tunic. Paul Bettany plays English poet and author Geoffrey Chaucer, one of the real-life characters in the film. When doing research on Chaucer, director Brian Helgeland said that there was a 6-month period of Chaucer's life where no one knew where he was, so he set the film during that time frame. Actor Paul Bettany did a recent interview with Interreviewed where he revealed that he wasn't too uncomfortable being buck naked in not just one scene but two. In the interview, he said that the costume department offered him a day-glow yellow sock for his privates. He told the wardrobe team, "The one factor extra embarrassing than strolling down the road bare in entrance of individuals is strolling down the road with a day-glow sock on your penis." When poor Chaucer does finally get some clothes, it's assumed that this leather surcoat with the fur collar is also a hand-me-down from Sir Ector. Sir Ector is the dead knight that keeps on giving. In the same interview with Interreviewed, Bettany said that his long coat, to not in any means deride the jacket's marvelous in a medieval pop comedy. However, I don't assume strolling down the streets of New York metropolis. It doesn't really feel like a sensible choice for me, sartorially talking. Clothing-wise, Chaucer also gets an upgrade. His second look is this slightly below-the-knee tan leather coat faced with brown fur along the center front, on the cuffs, and collar. And the sleeves are slashed so that they could be worn as hanging sleeves as well. And the coat is also slashed at the back, up to the waist, and trimmed with more brown fur. In this close-up, you can see the top stitching detail along the seams. The antagonist of the story is Count Adhemar, who is played by Rufus Sewell. If Count Adhemar is based upon any historical figures, it's likely Louis I, the French Duke of Anjou, who reigned from 1360 until his death in 1384. The guy only lived for 24 years. Adhemar has just 2 costumes plus a set of armor. His lightly padded asymmetrical gambeson appears to be made of a grainy brown leather with a black leather contrasting leather and trimmed in velvet. Adhemar wears the same costume at the Battle of Poitiers, but with the addition of a leather vest. You can see that the jacket is faced with the same velvet we see on the cuffs. Rufus Sewell stuntman's custom-made costume went up for auction, although it appears to be made of cloth and not leather. This item sold at auction for only $54. For the ball, Adhemar wears a black velvet surcoat with hanging brown sleeves. There is a fine gold trim detail, and you can't really see it in the film, but the fabric has a geometric texture. Adhemar's most striking costume, though, is his nearly black suit of armor. Sewell said in a behind-the-scenes interview, "I let the armor do the action for me. It's pure steel. I don't know how many pounds it weighs, but the helmet's about 30 pounds. Well, it's 100 degrees outside, and you regularly have to have water poured on you, and you watch the steam go psst." Costume designer Caroline Harris said, "The armor is not sheepskin, you know. It'll never be comfortable. When you lift your visor, you get a genuine sigh of a tortured person, which is great." While we don't always see it, this piece of additional armor is called the wrapper. According to the Art Institute Chicago, the purpose of the wrapper is to reinforce the lower helmet visor and the guard brace to strengthen the left shoulder. The armor was custom made by Armadillo Limited. As you can see here, it's a natural steel color and not black like it appears on the screen. And you can also see all the beautiful details on the armor, which are hard to make out in the movie. The full set of armor pictured here went to auction and sold for an undisclosed amount. According to the Heritage auction listing, his costume included a two-piece set of undergarment shirt and trousers painted to resemble chainmail that was possibly used in the 1967 film Camelot. James Purefoy plays Sir Thomas Colville, later to be revealed Edward the Black Prince, a real historical figure. According to My Armory, the nickname Black Prince, first seen in the 16th century, seemingly comes from Edward's choice in armor colors and from his use of black in heraldic devices, though some claim it resulted from his foul temper. Compared to William and Adhemar, Edward has the most elaborate armor of the three, although not so ostentatious as to give his identity away. This is a gilt bronze effigy of the Black Prince in his full armor and surcoat, depicting his coat of arms. The historic Environment Scotland blog states that a knight would wear a metal helmet and a heavy suit of armor, which could take an hour to put on. Over that he wore a brightly colored surcoat displaying his coat of arms. Each knight had a different coat of arms so he could be recognized while wearing a helmet. James Purefoy's full set of jousting armor went up for auction by Screen Used, but remained unsold. My favorite costume in the entire film is Edward's brown leather coat with a silkscreen print of his coat of arms, although it's toned down from the vibrant colors. The collar and cuff are trimmed in brown fur, and while his armor went up for auction, I haven't seen the coat anywhere, which leads me to believe that the actor likely has it. Let me know in the comments what your favorite costume is. Lady Jocelyn is William's love interest, and she's played by American actress Shannyn Sossamon. This will likely cause a bit of controversy in the chat, but I was less fond of Jocelyn's costumes. But let me first start with what I liked and take it from there. This is one of my favorite Jocelyn costumes. It's not only beautiful, but the gown with a matching overvest and headpiece suits her very well. I really love the embroidery along the center front opening. It looks like stump work, although I'm not an expert on that. Now, I've seen some criticism of this costume online, but I personally think it's a solid one. There's some Asian influences, and the hat is definitely a statement piece. The production notes state that this is a handcrafted period hat with a straw crown and a brim edged in gold thread. I like that the brim of the hat, sort of veil-like, shows her modesty in a contemporary way. Diane's costumes and research found that this historical reference photo shows that 15th century women did in fact wear headdresses like this. Here's some behind-the-scenes images of Shannyn being fitted and the final head-to-toe picture of the costume. And I'm not certain what fabric was used for the overgown, but its straw-like texture reminds me of this lightweight horsehair fabric. This overgown, made from what I think is shantung silk, again appears to be Asian-inspired. There's a beautiful ombre effect on the skirt and the bell sleeves with golden panel inserts. Perhaps this was a time consideration or a budget issue, but the gown is unlined so you can see where the seams are serged. She wears it with this delicate filigree gemstone necklace. Interestingly, the costume is currently available on eBay for £2,795 or approximately $3,800 US. According to the listing, the original costume was worn by Shannyn Sossamon, and it was originally sold on July 31st, 2013. I'll leave a link in the description in case you want to check it out. Here's another very pretty gown that Jocelyn wears in her chambers. Diane's Costumes points out that the gold necklace is of her heraldry, but unfortunately I wasn't able to get a sharp enough picture to see what it is exactly, but it appears to be two beasts of some kind. This gown is very similar, and she wears the same necklace with her sigil. I don't have many decent images of this costume, which is easily my favorite of hers. It's a gold chevron coat with a contrasting purple trim worn with a matching purple split skirt. Here it is from the back. And her hair kind of gave me some Queen Amidala vibes. Jocelyn wears this yellow silk gown at the end of the movie. According to the production notes, the embroidered Chinese silk dress worn in this scene was a century old. I like this costume, but I'm not fond of the corkscrew curls that look more 2001 than 1370 or even 1970. Since Shannyn Sossamon had shorter hair at the time, these hair pieces are falls, but the hair looks synthetic. Some of Jocelyn's other outfits, I'm just meh about it. For instance, this one, the fabric is pretty enough, but it is rather shapeless and completely upstaged by this fabulous yellow velvet gown worn by the woman on the right. And I don't mind this gown so much, but again, with the corkscrew curls. This costume is beautifully made. According to the production notes, it's an off-white bell-shaped coat cut from handmade felt and hand-embroidered with Jocelyn's heraldry in gold thread, gold bullion, and hand-painted pearls. But it doesn't really work for me or the scene. This is the moment when William is supposed to fall for Jocelyn. Yes, she is meant to be pious, at least on the outside, but I cannot fathom that William would turn his head with her in this look. This costume is one of my least favorites in Jocelyn's wardrobe. So the color's fine. It's very similar to the embroidered Chinese gown, but the construction, honestly, it's abysmal and it's completely unflattering on the actor. I feel pretty confident that the cutter hated it too. You can see here in the fitting that it doesn't work at all, and honestly, they would have been better off just trashing the whole thing at this point. This is why a muslin mock-up is so important before cutting the costume in the fabric, but productions don't always allow for this important step. And I'm really going to ruffle some feathers with this statement, but I hate Jocelyn's ball gown. So to be fair, when I first watched this movie 20 years ago, her outfit didn't really bother me. And even on my recent rewatch, I had a bit of a meh feeling about it. But now that I've sat with this costume for several weeks, her whole look here is an abomination, in my humble opinion. Firstly, the color's dreadful. I mentioned earlier that there is so much chartreuse in this scene, and then they put it on the leading lady. She should have had her own color. Next, she's meant to coordinate with William, and I mean, it's in the text, but instead she just clashes with him, and William, dare I say, upstages her. The silhouette is unflattering, and we have the weird accents of burgundy. And then, to add insult to injury, they've incorporated burgundy and gold pieces into her crimped mane. Like, honestly, it's just a mess. A beautiful girl deserves a beautiful costume. Now, I don't want to end things on a sour note, so I just want to say that I loved the majority of the costumes, especially the men's, including the armor. Let me know in the comments what costumes you liked or didn't like, if there were any. And if you made it to the end of this video, I want to thank you for spending time with me. I'll see you in the next video.